get to be the number one person in deciding things for yourself. Don't have other people decide for you. You get to say, I am going to use my own agency and my ability to create. Find the route or navigation to make it clear to people that this is part of who you are, right? I think people still need to know. But then I would say to employers, the flip side is you want to create an environment where people feel readily comfortable to be able to come, right? So if the environment feels like it's very closed off to people being open about how they would like to be able to show up, that right there is going to make it that much harder. So both sides need to think about those two pieces.
Hello and welcome to Visionary Voices. I'm your host, Ida, and today we are thrilled to have Jason Murray. Jason is the founder, president, and managing partner of BIPOC Executive Search. If you don't know what that is, it simply means that businesses pay Jason's company to seek out and recruit highly qualified candidates for senior level executive positions. It's an honor to have you today, Jason. Welcome to the podcast.
It's such a pleasure to be speaking with you, Ida. Thanks for having me.
Great. So I like before we hit record, I just mentioned to you that I was watching you on another podcast. For those who are going to be listening to this, please take a moment and go check out the podcast episode that Jason did with Lee. Tea with Lee. Her name is Lee Koo. You can find that on Facebook. I think you can find it on Facebook, but it's definitely on YouTube. That was such an insightful conversation, and I don't want to go into the questions that she asked you. So for our audience, you're gonna get so much more value by going to check out what she did, and then that's more. This is more like a continuation of that podcast and going deeper on certain things that were not touched there.
Excellent. It was a great podcast. And I do think that there's a lot that people would get out of watching it as they will with this one. So thanks so much for highlighting that, Ida.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I want to go into your personal story. What was your upbringing like, and how did that quite shape the impact that you're creating in business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, my parents are Jamaican and both came to Canada in the 70s. My dad, unfortunately, passed away actually November of last year. So, right now, just my mother. And they were married for over 50 years. So, they enjoyed a lot of experiences together. And I would certainly say that I benefited from seeing the meaningful care that they brought to one another and, of course, family. When my parents first came to Finch area, and so that's where I was born. I was born in North York and spent probably the first 12 years of life in North York. So was in the Jane and Finch area probably for about a year of my overall life, and then moved to a community area around kind of like the Islington and Steeles kind of area. Then moved to Mississauga when I was about 12 or 13, so just before being a teenager. And I would say that a lot of my experiences that informed this work certainly is rooted in some of the environs that I lived in. So, my family, for the first number of years, lived in assisted living, so subsidized housing. And when my parents moved to Mississauga, that was them saving up all of their pennies to be able to say that they were officially homeowners. So it was a really big thing for them. And I got to see how hard they were working to provide. And I always said to myself that I wanted to be able to take the gifts that they really brought to me, working so hard, to be able to do just that for other people. Another big part of my formative life has been the work that I've done in arts and culture spaces. I find that while there's still a lot of work to do in arts and culture, it's definitely a sector that continually has very open dialogue around equity related issues, which is another big thing that fueled my own passion to be able to drive a lot of this work in the context of executive search.
So you had mentioned about having that background in the arts and creative space, and I think you actually acted in a movie or something.
Oh, do you want to pull out
Yeah, I want to
the
pull out the performer
performer
resume
resume? I
because
see.
the reason I'm going there is because oftentimes we're stuck in an identity of who we are and we cannot quite pivot into something else. But it's really about pulling from that and seeing how you brought it into the work that you do right now because it's part and parcel of who you are.
Yes, it most certainly is. It most certainly is. I did perform in some movies or TV shows and commercials, stage productions. So Mamma Mia with Mervish Productions is one of a few. That one was probably the longest one because it was a full 2 years at the Royal Alexandra Theatre. So that ended
Okay.
up becoming another home. Uh, I've always saw the power of arts to be able to open up hearts and minds. So much of the work that I do, so much work that you do, it is about connecting with people. And it is about being able to come into a conversation saying, we actually have a lot more in common than we think. And so much of what brings us together and the commonalities comes from what moves us emotionally, and art is connected to emotion. So that's another big part of my world, the art scene.
Do you have a favorite line from Mamma Mia?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'm about to start singing all the songs for you and everyone watching, Ida. So
Wait, wait, wait. Does your staff know that you sing?
they do. In fact, they join me in the odd sing song because we actually record songs together. So if anyone is interested to know a little bit more about BIPOC Executive Search, the band, go to our YouTube channel and check out some of our holiday songs, some of our summer anthems, so they know because they sing with me.
Can you sing one for us right now?
Oh, okay. So you really want me to be on the spot here? Okay. So
Of course.
uh, in the spirit of the holidays that are going to be coming up soon, last year's song went something like, we wish you a very merry." So that's a little bit of a teaser because the holidays are coming up again.
Wow, that's great. Oh my god, okay. When I went to your YouTube channel, I don't think I was looking for the songs. I was just looking for what Jason is all about, and so I didn't get to see any of those song pieces, but now I definitely need to go and check it out cuz you're great at singing, man. That's good. I don't think I could sing half as much as what you just did right now.
But I feel, Ida, that you have to do something for the viewers now. Something so we get a sense of your voice.
Oh my goodness, Jason, that's insane. Okay. Who? What can I sing? The only songs that are coming to my mind are the songs that my kids love to sing.
Sing one of them. Sing a little bit.
This morning, I was literally singing with my son. Um, I was singing with him the Itsy Bitsy Spider. So we're singing the Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water spout. That's all I'm gonna
See,
do.
you have a great voice as well, but see, that's the point, right? Art and culture can really connect us. People taking time to write poems, write song lyrics. The second that you say "itsy bitsy spider," it actually means something for me and for you and for your children.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think it's a really important form of again just dialoguing and staying connected.
yeah. Wow, no one has ever made me sing on a podcast. So you just did something that nobody has done before. That's great. I think it speaks to who you are. Because when I was listening to the podcast, you were talking about interview techniques, right? You talked about this quantitative approach that people could take in responding to question or storytelling approach. Um, so I think I'm jumping ahead there. But I'm really just trying to get to know what are some things that people need to know in going into an interview that's going to help them to land that job, because usually when people are going in there at this place where it's like, oh, I need this job because I need to put food on my table, but you being a person who has conducted hundreds of interviews, 500 plus. What is something that you can say to people so they can embrace who they are and bring themselves to that interview and not just be afraid of, am I going to get this job or not, but really having um, themselves present in it and being themselves in it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So much of what the interviewer is looking for, even though they don't say this, is a sense of ease for themselves as well. And so, if you are interviewing, as much as possible, if you can come into the space trying your very, very best to feel comfortable, trying your very, very best to not lead with nerves, that actually helps the other person feel as well. I'm really feeling a sense of this person being someone that's going to be able to walk in and do great work. Now, of course, the question is,
Mhm.
how do I make sure that I don't have nerves? Because that is obviously something that is very common to being human and very common to interviewing. So I often will say things like, make sure that you have a glass of really cold water with you. If you are interviewing in person, ask, can I have a glass of cold water? Because when you sip it, it really does help to cool down the system. But then there's also things that people can do to prepare, because when you are more prepared, you are less nervous. So much of where the nerves come from is, I actually feel that they may actually ask me something that I'm not quite ready to respond to. And so, some of what you just mentioned, Ida, is some of what I tell people. Sometimes you want to answer as a storyteller. We all remember stories. We all convene with family and friends to say, so what happened to me this week was fill in the blank. It's okay sometimes just to remember certain stories that you want to inject in certain answers without feeling like you have to have this big revolutionary answer. We connect over stories. So, for example, if someone were to ask you a question such as, what is your leadership style? Right? Just a very plain, simple question. What is your leadership style? Sometimes people might have a hard time defining their leadership style, but they might remember a story. So you might want to say, for the that question, the way I want to answer that is, I want to tell you about a new graduate that I had a pleasure of working with, and then go into whatever story that comes to mind, because that will just be free flowing. Or another technique is, sometimes we are finding it hard to kind of wrap our answers. So sometimes I will say, just think of maybe 3 points that you want to bring up, or 2 points that you want to bring up, to a range of things that you might think will come up in terms of questions. But most importantly, if you're going into an interview, ask the interviewer, what are the topics or what are the questions that are likely to come up, so that it gives you an opportunity to do some preparation. And then again, the nerves won't be there as much. And then for the interviewer, they'll feel even better about your candidacy because they felt you were in your element.
So that's a thing that a candidate can actually ask for.
Oh, yes. I would say, not just ask for, but make it very clear that it's something that you need to have. Yeah. So again, they don't have to necessarily give you the questions word for word, but just some sort of overture that says, I would like to prepare. I
Mhm.
would like to think about some things that is going to be useful for you to know about me. So, can you give me any sense of what the meeting will entail, what some of the questions or topics might be like? And hopefully, they'll respond by giving you some insights.
So how do you find the balance then between being over prepared and it seeming like super rehearsed versus getting to actually know the person? Because one thing that I've found is that people sometimes who do very well on interviews don't necessarily know the job itself. It's just because they knew all the right answers to give. And so they excelled at the interview, but they can't do the work.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, interviews are only one of a few ways to assess people. And just for anyone listening that is on the interviewer hiring side, please always remember that, right? There is a bit of performance in interviews, and it should not be the only data point that's used to make a decision. In terms of the question around over preparing, it's always important for people to, yes, do some prep, but then still be in the moment when you're actually having the conversation. Life happens when it's happening.
Yeah.
So let it happen as it's happening.
Yeah.
And be open to what the interview is actually supposed to be like. Because if we're preparing, we're saying to ourselves, here's what I think it's going to be like. And maybe part of us is saying, maybe I'm hoping it's going to be like this now that I've done the prep. But if you have to go through the conversation having never looked at your notes, that's okay as well. That means that you're really in your element and you're listening and you're responding accordingly. And that will always go much further than being wedded to whatever notes or whatever preparation you've done prior.
Hmm. So one thing that, like, I haven't actually hired at the level of executives before, but I've hired in HR, and this was more for like accounting technician position, so it's more junior level things. And I what I noticed was that a lot of the people who would put stuff on their resumes don't necessarily know how to do it. So, for example, when it came to hiring for the position in accounting, we needed people who knew how to use a particular software. And so we went very specific to questions, and they did excellent in responding to the questions. But the test of it actually came in the doing of it. So we would put a computer and say, okay, these are the things that I want you to actually. So I need a set of a balance sheet or an income statement, or I need to see this particular thing, for example, because that's the kind of work you're going to be doing repetitively. And they couldn't do it. Is there nerves in that, or is it just over prepared because I know what the answer should be? But like, if an employer doesn't get to go to the level of testing on the job, like giving that kind of test as part of the interview, how do you know you're getting a good candidate?
Yeah. And there are certain jobs for sure where you do want to incorporate some level of testing, for things that or for roles that are in the area of finance. We would say, similarly to what you are describing, it's good to make sure that you are infusing some level of testing in the process. If it's a marketing and communications role, you're probably going to need the individual to respond to some sort of case study so that you can get a
Yes.
sense of how they deliver. Sometimes wording that just has to be so compelling in a confined amount of time. Um, I will say that and this is not to make anyone feel like I am not recognizing how difficult it is to actually go through interviews. But in this particular climate where we have, all sorts of technology, um, and we're trying to get processes done even quicker at times, we do have to make sure that we are injecting some of those tests, right?
Like what?
Um, there,
Oh, like the test I talked
well,
about, or something different?
yeah, no, similar to the test that you're talking about, right? So, like,
Okay.
even in finance, really having someone even respond to what we're seeing in an annual report, right? And being able to look at some of the numbers and to be able to comment critically on what one is seeing in the balance sheet, in the operating budgets, in the expense lines, all of those components, so that when the person is coming into the role, you either know what you are going to be working with them on, or already know that they have the expertise that you're hoping for them to have. Because there are times where individuals might be hired into a role, but you at least know before they get to the job some of the pieces that you'll either have maybe some other individuals doing a little bit more of because you just see so much promise and potential in them.
Hmm.
But that's something that you should try to find out in the process, that when you're making a decision, it's informed and not something that comes to you and the other person as well as a surprise or on the job, because
Hmm.
that can start to have some, feelings come up that can cause the relationship to not build in a positive way, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
resenting that the process didn't have the rigor that you thought it should have, or potentially having the person no longer in the job. So much of what resumes are is it is the evolution of someone's career and therefore their career story. And so, what always really pains me in many ways is just seeing some short tenures at times because things weren't done in a way to make sure that everyone is going to be successful and that there are win-wins. Um, so we have to be very, very careful about how we are helping people along their path so that they can build up a very compelling story as opposed to one where, it looks like there could have been some stops along the way that weren't as favorable.
Yeah, and that's something you really went deep into in the conversation that you had with Lee, because you talked about, which goes to the core of what you do at BIPOC Executive Search, right? You talked about those short tenures that are there that sometimes is because the setup, the way the environment was created, it was put in it was in a way that the person wasn't set up for success. The person was maybe highly scrutinized, and because you're more scrutinized, you're probably more prone to making a mistake, and then that's also going to lead to you leaving the job sooner than other people. So, like it wasn't something I'd ever heard about, but it's something that I've seen people getting judged by because, oh, you were only at this company for this short period of time. So, what is some piece of education that you can then give to people on the hiring side to be able to pay attention to things like that?
Yeah, I mean, the advice is the education and the advice is the awareness, right? There are a lot of people that aren't necessarily aware fully that there is research that shows that certain groups and certain people of particular ethnocultural backgrounds or intersectionalities have a completely different experience at work with the way that they are measured, with the way that their relationship evolves with supervisors. And so the more people are knowledgeable about that, the more people are educated about that, they themselves can make sure that they are not on the side of doing that to other individuals, and can make sure that there's also those equity considerations. So the education piece is really, really important. And, I'm really big overall on playing to people's strengths. So, on the flip side, if let's say there is something that is going on with any employee where, they perhaps aren't performing optimally, that should also be an opportunity to say, are they in the right position or in the right role? Because to me, if someone is hired into an environment, by and large, it's because they are going to be able to contribute to that environment or some way, shape, or form, right? There might be the odd cases where people, it's just not really the right alignment at all. But if they went through a process and they were hired, and people were thinking they're going to be great for the environment, chances are they're going to be able to contribute in some way, shape, or form. So sometimes we just have to be able to say, let's retain the individual. Let's make sure that their story on their career evolution or their resume is still looking great by having the continuity, by putting them into a different department, putting them into a different function, having them work with a different individual. So that would be some advice that I would give too. And in my opinion, it actually is a good thing for the supervisor for the company because I think there are more headaches when you exit someone or when you don't actually work with their strengths. It can start to permeate in culture and start to actually create divides and tensions that you sometimes are better off not being a part of creating.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And you talked about you creating BIPOC Executive Search 3 years ago, and this was very much in relation to the time when the George Floyd thing was happening, and also COVID with the great, not the great resignation, but the great. You said you used the word. a lot of people were losing their
Great
jobs, but the BIPOC people were
discoloration.
discoloration. That's the word. But the BIPOC people were disproportionately affected by this. Talk to me about that journey of creating, of having that idea and deciding to do something about it as an entrepreneur to create BIPOC Executive Search.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. You know, I have for many years in my career have integrated equity considerations into the way that I would facilitate, in the way that I would oversee processes. Um, was only able to do so much of that, I would say, because I was working at other organizations, and knew that there would be a day where I would want to really double down on all of that more. In 2020, with the death of George Floyd, more specifically the murder of George Floyd, and with COVID, as we, in terms of health disparities and inequities, um, when looking around the landscape, uh, I'm one of a few individuals that have certain lived experiences and lived realities, from the side of being Black, from the side of being LGBTQ2SIA, and also, being someone who's walked the halls of corporate organizations and have worked with many different sectors across the country. So I had to have that conversation with myself about the timing. And this right
Mhm.
now is a time where someone with my positionality should really make sure that they are doing something to help with truly addressing these issues and problems. I have to shout out the wonderful Wes Hall. I mean, Wes was doing all these wonderful things with Black North Initiative, and that was
Mhm.
obviously in 2020 as well. And he was having conversations with a number of people in the Black community, people who were in positions of influence or in leadership roles, etc. I happened to be one of the individuals that had conversations with him, and he supported me right away. I mean, when I say supported, it was profound, the level of support that Wes threw behind me. Even with respect to having a Globe and Mail spread. I mean, I literally ended up having a Globe and Mail spread in July, and that was Wes's influence, saying that this is something that people need to get behind for Black North Initiative, right? That led to Dahabo Ahmed Omar's appointment. The visibility around that was huge because so many people do know Wes, and to be able to be that
Yeah.
person that guided that process that led to Dahabo's appointment, that really starts to spread a lot of word, right?
Mhm.
Work that I do, the work that colleagues do. So he was really instrumental in helping this firm to launch. And Wes continues to be a supporter of BIPOC Executive Search. And it's just wonderful to be able to see that he himself, has been so invested in the success of the company, and continues to be, as I mentioned.
I started Black North because I want to change the way Black people are perceived in Canada. When I go into a boardroom, there's generally no one that looks like me in the boardroom. I want to change that, and Black North is here to do exactly that.
Wes is one of those people that I had never heard of before until the time when he invested in Tautis Food on the Dragon's Den. And then I started diving into his personal story as well. And I read his book and I was like, wow, this is somebody who was creating the change that is needed. And he amplified a message that I wasn't even aware of. Like being a black person, a black woman, um I think I would say I'm privileged in a way because I haven't been exposed to certain elements of racism. So there are certain times that when people say some things to me, it's like, really, that happened to you? It's never happened to me. But just because it hasn't happened to me, it doesn't mean that that's the reality of other people. And so having Wes amplify that message and open up, like, this is actually what is wrong with the country, and you can fix it by doing more inclusion. And I heard him talking about, he mentioned BIPOC Executive Search, like, oh, this is one of the companies I invested in one of the interviews. So that's how I found you as well, from his interview that he did on a certain platform. I don't know where. And I said, oh, okay, I want to definitely get to talk to Jason because why not? He's amazing.
I truly, truly am. I just think he's such an incredible human. Like his story is so moving. And, I have had the pleasure now of just being around him in different spaces, etc. And he really walks the talk. Like he really walks the talk. And we need more people that are willing to walk the talk, right? Um, it's people can say
Yeah.
things, but then you want to actually see what they do. And then at the end of the day, all that matters is what you see. I mean, I had a conversation with Wes maybe about maybe 2 weeks ago, and I was just like, Wes, you have done like work that has employed literally thousands of people. Like I'm obviously doing work that is about employment as well. Um, but then when I'm looking at like some of the things that he's done, I'm like, Wes, like there are just like thousands upon thousands of families that are directly impacted. And then there are millions and millions of people who are indirectly, impacted based on the work that he is doing and the messaging that he's putting out there. So all the time in the world for him.
It's so beautiful to hear that. And um like you mentioned, finding somebody who actually walks the talk, right? It's when you get to see a person like that, I think you just get to believe more in the fact that there are still good people out there, people who, yes, they are making a profit out of whatever it is they're doing because they are entrepreneurs, they have to make money, but more about the impact that is being created and the lives that are being changed by the businesses that are being made, right? And that's what entrepreneurship is all about. It's about finding a problem that people want a solution to, and creating that solution, and indirectly you get to profit from it. So kudos to him, kudos to you, and kudos to all the people who are out there trying to create a positive impact.
Yeah, I often say, I think that there's something very special about one being able to say that my livelihood and my living is based on making the world a better place, right? I mean, if I
Mhm.
had to be using my time to be doing anything right now, to be making a living, if I can actually say that I am having an impact on changing this world, and then the other parts are like, okay, here's income that helps us sustain yourself and to be able to wake up and eat, et cetera, et cetera. I want to be able to say that I am doing things that is helping other people and that is changing the world, as opposed to making money and um, you know dumping oil into the oceans and killing the fish,
Mm.
right? I mean, there are people who are
Yeah.
doing some things to make money. We were kind of like, really? If I can fix a problem, I would look for the next problem to be able to say, now I'm focusing on this, right? And I feel like there are a lot
Yeah.
of entrepreneurs, like Wes and other people who are very much like that as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I personally am trying to do, because in my business, I do accounting and taxes and I help entrepreneurs with that side of things. But on the side as well, the impact that I'm trying to create in the lives of people is through financial education. Because newcomers, especially when they move over to North America, yes, everybody needs Canadian experience, but before you even get to that place where you can have the job that's going to really really sustain you, you start with all the survival jobs, but most often before you get to the place where you can make that change, you're in a hole. And so you find people who are in this place where they get to accept work which is not the work that they would actually wholeheartedly accept and be like, yes, I'm proud of what I'm doing right now, just because on the financial side they need to make ends meet. And so financial education is one of those pieces that I'm really really passionate about changing, especially for newcomers who also happen to be mostly people of color, right? So it's just one of those missions that I'm trying to help for a lot of people as well. So, question for you: what does success look like for you now at BIPOC Executive Search? What is it that once you see that this thing is happening, is going to be like, yes, I'm creating an impact?
The answer that I often will give to a question like this is sustainability. Success for me is making sure that we can continually have relevance in the marketplace so that we can continually make change. There's for any entrepreneur, there's always going to be that question in the back of your mind of, is it still going to be relevant for people? Are people still going to be using our services? And the answer to that right now is yes, but that could change. And so, having an organization that's continually sustainable is what success is. There's always going to be work that a firm like ours is going to need to do on whether it's EDI work, whether it's reconciliation work, whether it's cultural transformation work, whether it's helping people psychologically to feel ready to step into higher office. And so for me, I just want to make sure whatever work that we do right now to help people is something that we will continually be able to for the long haul, because I really feel like it's going to be something that is needed to have around long after I'm not. so
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
so setting it up in the way that really allows for all that. And we are in the United States now. So we have a few colleagues there. We're here in Canada. I would love for the business to be overseas. So maybe that's the second part that I put onto it. So say sustainability, but then global presence, because this is something
Okay.
that has global relevance.
Yeah. Okay, that's beautiful. And now speaking of that, you've definitely touched the lives of lots and lots of people. What is one of those stories that actually stand out to you as a big transformation you've had in somebody's life?
There are so many. Oh, and of course, I can't mention names, but
Of course, just the story.
yeah, but one thing that I would say is it's always really, really rewarding when there are individuals that come into a process and they aren't sure they're ready for a particular role. But through the process and through the conversations and through the coaching and support, not only do they end up in the role, but then they hit the ball so far out of the park that it is still in the air to this day. I
Hmm.
love stories like that. But there are some like process related stories that I will always remember. I remember a story where someone who was flying in to their interview during the winter uh, had a flight canceled, and it was very, very important that they were there in person. And I remember,
Hmm.
getting on with the travel agent, and we got them a new flight that was about like an hour drive to another airport. So they had to,
Ooh.
get on the road and drive to this next airport. And, by the time they actually got into the city, they literally were picked up from this next airport, brought to the institution, and jumped right into their presentation and their interview. And they ended up in the job.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so just like real, like special memories. There are so many in the hundreds of searches for sure.
Oh, look at that smile that you're saying it. I could feel your joy that that person got the role that you were trying to get them into.
Yeah, after all of that, they were still really focused and felt like they really had a very committed partner to help them physically get there and then still be able to perform. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, super. I want to look at some financial mistakes that you see new entrepreneurs making. You yourself being an entrepreneur, and you were fortunate enough to have the incredible West Hall behind you, but not everybody gets that, and a lot of people make financial mistakes when they get into entrepreneurship. What is something you've seen, and what would your advice be to them?
I always say that so much of the work that anyone is here to do when they are, the business owner and entrepreneur is to market and to drive sales. Sometimes I feel like there's a lot of time that is spent on the product. And of course, you have to spend time on the product or the service and get that right. But you also have to be able to get things out there that people will, contract or retain you for. And over time, there might be iterative changes to the product or to the service, but you have to be able to get yourself out there and bring in money so that you do actually have, the dollars and the revenue that's needed to continue to grow. So sometimes I feel, some entrepreneurs might spend a bit too much time on the service or the product and trying to refine it and try to get it right, as opposed to, any of that partnership development, any of that client generation, really trying to focus on marketing and making things differentiated sales. Once those things are really robust, then you can start really going somewhere with the business.
Hmm. And at what point would you say team building should come in?
Team building should come in right away. I mean, when I say right away, it needs to be foundational and it needs to continue all the time. I go as far as saying to clients, while you don't have to become best friends with the people that you work with, you need to still cast your mind on your work relationships in a manner that is similar to the way that you would think of friendships. So if
Hmm.
someone, let's say, makes a mistake that's a friend of mine, like someone that I generally think is a friend, I want to preserve that friendship. And so the way that I react to that person's mistake is going to maybe, make sure that they're aware of it, but it's not going to be so emotionally charged that it can cause the friendship to fray. I'm going to say, this person is someone that I value. I'm going to make sure that it's very constructive. It's the same thing at work. We really need to focus on people as fellow humans that we're sharing energy exchanges with, and really value them as colleagues. And I would go so as far as people that you really want to get to know because you care about.
Yeah. You talked about a quote, not a quote, but a sentence I just said there is that is this an environment that will feed my soul? Can I bring my whole self to work? This is something from when you were talking with Lee. So is this an environment that would feed my soul, and can I bring my whole self to work? Thinking about the work environment as a whole, right? Because a lot of people are in roles where they feel like they have to leave a part of themselves at the door when they're walking in.
Yeah, yeah.
Looking at it from the employer and the employee side, what would you say to people on both sides?
Yeah, I think employees, I would say to anyone, always just be in integrity with who you are. And so that sometimes means just like finding the route. I don't want to always use the word courage, but find the route, or navigation to make it clear to people that this is part of who you are, right? I think people still need to know. It's like, when I came out, to family, like
Yeah.
I had to find it in myself to say, well, they need to know, right? Like like
Yes.
if I'm gonna build the right relationship with them in terms of being my whole self, I need to tell them, right? And it's
Yeah.
similar. Like people sometimes we need to give people the benefit of the doubt where they would say, now that I do know, okay, great. Like I want to show up the way you need me to. But then I would say to employers, the flip side is you want to create an environment where people feel readily comfortable to be able to come, right? So if the environment feels like it's very closed off to people being open about how they would like to be able to show up, that right there is going to make it that much harder. So both sides need to think about those two pieces.
And I think in theory we know that, but it's not happening. Because there's a lady who mentioned to me, and this might not really be related, but there's a black lady who mentioned to me that her colleagues are always commenting about her hair because she changes her hairdo every time. And so in order to get them to stop talking about her hair, she's like, oh, it's a cultural thing. And now everybody is like, what kind of culture is it that makes you want to change your hair all the time? So she doesn't feel comfortable going in there. Or I mean, it's not even related to like the job itself, but it creates that environment where you don't feel like you could, or you feel like you have to defend something about your culture. what in the things that she said was a wrong approach to how to get people to see that your hair is part of you, but without necessarily saying it's a cultural thing type thing? I don't know. Is that something that would come up as a reason why somebody doesn't want to go to work?
I mean, I think that when we are thinking about our places of work, there are going to be some people that we bond with readily, right? That we feel very comfortable with pretty quickly. And then there are some other relationships that just take some work, right? Take some very intentional work. If ever those types of things are coming up, I first and foremost always recommend to the employee to think about who are those individuals that you readily bond with or that have it doesn't have to always be people who have similar lived experiences. It can be people from that allyship standpoint that you feel very close to, because those are the individuals that you should open up with first and foremost and say, there are comments that are being made by some folks, and even if it's one of them, but you bond with them, right? And there are a few things that
Mhm.
you've raised, and I just wanted to have a conversation. But the reason why that's so important is because you need to psychologically and in your nervous system not feel like you are on your own with respect to responding more openly, right? So if you know that you've connected with one or two other people about what's been coming up, right? Not saying go to HR and make a formal discussion out of it, but just people that you bond with, that can then
Yeah.
start to change the way that you are feeling because you know other people. So then what happens is if it comes up again in, let's say, an open forum, if like one or two other people that you really bond with are aware of how you're feeling about it, they as well might be a part of maybe having a side conversation and say, so I just want you to know that's actually not appropriate from a cultural sensitivity standpoint, and here is why, right? So you need to start
Mm.
building up, and those types of things are what ends up permeating culture over time, so that in future if there's another individual who changes their hairstyle, etc., people start to know because of that instance, right, that is not something that one should be doing, right, in terms of the way that people are responding
Mm.
or reacting. So it's a bit of a different approach, and it's an unfortunate one that people even have to take, but that's often the best way to go about that.
Yeah, because it's something very, I would say, very minute, but in the eyes of the individual who was being asked that question, it's not, because she feels like she's being attacked for something that culturally she does and she hasn't ever thought about it. So for
Yeah.
me, it was just about trying to get into the mindset space to be like, okay, but how can I make you feel better about this conversation? And not like, she literally was looking for a different job because she felt like her colleagues were being hostile to her. Like, seriously.
Yeah,
So it's
it's a big thing.
it,
It's a
it
really,
could
really,
actually be. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's no small thing, right? I mean, anything about our identity that we feel we have to question, that all of a sudden will make us feel like we don't belong, or will make us feel gaslit, or will make us feel like we're not important, right? Any of those
Hmm.
pieces that people might be questioning from the wrong place. We
Yeah.
don't want to have to explain. So just from a cultural sensitivity standpoint, individuals actually need to know that certain things can be sensitive to certain cultures because of histories where people have often been told they cannot access space because of, right? And we know that
Hmm.
for Black hair, we have literally been told you are not allowed to access space because of your braids or because of whatever it is, right? So when people in this particular climate, even though we have a lot more acceptance around the histories and those traumas are going to linger for a long time. So if people even come across as, yeah, I'm curious about all these hairstyles, et cetera, what it can do is it can activate for someone those kind of histories of what they've had to been through.
Hmm.
And it's much better for people to know that and then not even broach it as a conversation, right?
Oh wow, wow, that's very insightful. I wouldn't even thought about it in that sense. But that's why these conversations have to happen, right? And that's why there is the importance of creating that awareness in the workplace, just in the culture, like just things that even among people within the same culture could look at it like, okay, no, that's nothing, but it is something depending on that person's lived experiences. It triggers something else for them and it creates a kind of culture that doesn't allow for them to be themselves at their place of work.
Yeah, I mean, if someone wants to comment, on something that looks different or whatever, like the different hairstyle, like sometimes it's just better to just say, you can just say someone looks great, right? Like you don't even have to single out like hair, right? You can just say like
Yes.
you just look like you're bringing so much energy today, like you just like very smiley and happy, right? As opposed to yeah, like your hair, and then it becomes like like overall, what that person is doing is they're just trying to feel great, look great, etc. And so you can just be very generic and just say, "Yeah, you look amazing. You look amazing."
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So, who are three people that you look up to besides West Hall? Who are three other people that you look up to and why?
Okay, so I'm gonna be corny and actually say my mother.
Mhm.
But it is true. I mean, her own story is incredible in terms of what she had to navigate. So I would say her. I am someone who just really always has to give recognition and praise for individuals that kind of like defy the odds. And even when I think about someone like a President Obama, I'm just like, oh my goodness, and just the calm and measured approach to leadership in spite of
Yeah.
all of what happens when you are running a country. I mean, to this day, I don't know how this person did not break a sweat in 8 years. I mean, when you reflect on it, it's really remarkable. You're like, this person was always, I'm like, do you run the country? Right.
He
Um,
has Michelle beside him.
well, there you go, right? Oh, yeah, that's my third right there, Michelle.
Oh yeah.
The two of them are just so amazing. Even when I think about my own leadership style, I'm always trying to make sure that even though there's a lot going on, remain calm, look at the bigger picture. Don't always put a magnifying glass on a problem because then you make it bigger. A lot of things are small, will just go away, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And now looking at you, definitely I identify you as a high performer. How do you manage to find balance in life or to create balance in life?
I am so intentional about everything, right? Like I'm intentional about hard work. I'm intentional about making a difference, and I am intentional about having a good time, right? Like I enjoy people and their company. I am always, looking for ways to experience things. So, I chair the board for the Toronto Fringe Festival, and so I will just literally be among a reservoir of talented individuals, incredible shows and performances where I get to learn, I get to feel all of those pieces. And I am intentional about rest as well when I'm able to find the time for it. I
Yeah.
will make sure it's all balanced.
Yeah. And when you end your email, you end it with a very intentional line. I noticed that in your email to me, you said something like create a great day. Why that unique choice of words? Because you explained something about it, right? It's not just coincidence. You actually want to use those words like create a great day. Why?
Yeah, and that's something that I've been using from the beginning of my career whenever my first email went out to that first person. So this is going over 20 years now. I really do feel that we sometimes as human beings have to remind ourselves that we do actually have some agency and some choice in the matter. Not completely, of course. But if
Yeah.
it is within your capacity to say, okay, this is how I'm feeling in this moment, but I want to feel I want to feel the emotion that's the complete opposite of it, right? Do you play that song that gets you dancing in your living room, right? Do you call
Yeah.
that friend that always knows the right thing to say? Do you just close your laptop and say, I'm going to go for a walk because I need to just center myself? So just always remember that you get to be the number one person in deciding things for yourself, right? Don't have other people decide for you. You get to say, I am going to use my own agency and my ability to create. When I look around us, there are skyscrapers. You and I are connecting over, video form. Like human beings have done so much to just create all the time. So let's also
Yeah.
remember that we get to create our experience as well to some extent. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I want to be respectful of your time right here. I want to give you the opportunity to share anything that I haven't yet asked you. And in addition to that, how our audience can connect with you to learn more from you and to see the beautiful work that BIPOC Executive Search is doing.
Well, really quickly, I will say you can find us on LinkedIn. We have our own BIPOC executive search page. BIPOCsearch.com is the website. So those are probably the two ways. And in terms of something to leave everyone with, everyone should be watching Ida's podcast. Everyone should be following Ida and all the socials. You are doing incredible work. And I want
Thank you.
to recognize you for that. I know that when, individuals come onto podcasts, of course, people are going to learn more about the subject or the person, but I want everyone to know who you are. I want everyone to subscribe. I want everyone to say, that's my go-to for questions that I have for finance, entrepreneurship, etc., because you are putting the work out there and you are deserving.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're so welcome.
That's so kind. All right, guys. So you know where to find us. If you've watched this on YouTube, check the description below for all the links on how you can reach out to either of us. If it's on the podcast, check the show notes. And until next time, thank you for being here today. Thank you, Jason, for your time. For more insightful conversations with entrepreneurs, check out this video right here. I think you'll love it. Continue to enjoy, and I'll see you there.